Hey, what's up, y'all? This is Jeff. In one of my last videos, I talked about how I worked in construction after not being able to find a job after college. And I got a lot of questions on how I even landed that construction job. And I wanted just to today dive into the story of that job. I learned a lot about during that opportunity, especially what led up to that opportunity of getting that first job. To be honest, right, as I mentioned in my last video, um, my construction job changed my life, and it did a lot of things for me, almost exactly what I needed at that time, being a young early 20s kid fresh out of college. And this opportunity I don't take lightly, and I think I learned so much and forever grateful for the chance. And I just wanted to be able to share. I think I just want to share the story of how I actually got that job in the first place. I think there's a lesson in this, and I hope this is helpful for anyone out there that's going through the same struggle currently. Okay, so if you've seen some of my other videos, right, you know that I just finished college, right? I went to school in Oregon, so just an average college. My dream school, being a big Ducks fan, I went to the University of Oregon, just graduated college in a STEM field, just think like a general science, that kind of thing, and learned a lot of math, learned a lot of science, and ultimately my grades weren't great, right? Coming from a low income environment, one of the things that I struggled with a lot when I entered college was, man, I personally realized that I was way behind and compared to a lot of my classmates, and just getting into college, struggling through it was a blessing in itself. And I'm a story for another day, but the grind through college was extremely difficult for me, but I made it through at the end with an absolutely terrible GPA. And I entered the workforce to try to find a job, officially first to start in a data analyst, anything that had to do with like math, data, Excel, that kind of thing. And of course, not knowing that those are like, incredibly hard to get jobs out of college. The story begins with me just applying for months on end. I moved to San Francisco because my sister lived here. And I actually, during that time period, I had a goal set out for myself. And my goal was to come to the city. I first stayed, got my foot in because my sister's friend was going overseas and just wanted a little bit of extra cash while her room was empty in her apartment. So I took that on. I was really into Jordans Nikes and Jordans at the time. So I actually sold all of my shoe collection and got a few bucks from that to be able to support me through my post-college experience. And every day applied to tons of jobs, went through many rejections, went to interviews all the way from going to like an Amazon, Google, all the way to like small startups that gave me, and everything in between. As I was progressing and bombing a lot of my interviews, I started opening up my job search a lot, right? I first went through the progressions of trying to get one of those big time jobs with the cool tech office. Of course, no luck, opening myself up to smaller companies. And ultimately, after a few months, and I really gave myself a 3-month window to try to get that first job. After that, about 3 months, I was living with my cousin at the time, which was gracious enough to offer me a place to stay while after I already went through 2 subleases, temporary subleases. So I was kind of like, in some ways, kind of like room hopping wherever I can to find a cheap place to stay while I was looking for a job. And at that time, I was living in Hayward, California with my cousin, a great guy with his kids, with my aunt. And again, still applying to jobs, but I knew my time was coming to the end, mainly because my resources were coming to an end. And I really didn't want to go back to Oregon. And so I opened up my job search to pretty much anything I can possibly find that required a bachelor's degree. And I actually stopped. One of the things that really helped me was I stopped looking on LinkedIn. For example, LinkedIn had a lot of really great, office jobs, tech jobs, right? Big company, white collar jobs. But I noticed that there was a lot more options on Indeed.com, like construction companies and local warehouses, that kind of thing. And I started getting a lot more hits, especially when I was opening things up. And so how I stumbled upon this job, like everybody else, was I applied through Indeed.com. I found a position, and the position was actually originally the label of it was a project manager position. And if you don't know anything about large construction sales, right, a lot of the times they have kind of like portfolio manager type titles for their sales folks. just so that when they talk to customers, they're not like the sales rep for the customer, rather than they are sales folks, but rather they're more of like the project manager for their large construction project. Saw this position, figured I can give it a shot. Required like just a couple years of experience, and they ultimately ended up giving me a call back. They gave me a call back, and this was a pretty good job. Originally, it paid, I think I remember it saying it paid like $70K at the time, which is unbelievable for me, and I was really happy they called me back. Spoke with the recruiting team at that company, and so the company I ended up working for was a really large American commercial roofing company. They did commercial roofs, everything from your local grocery store to skyscrapers. And I went into the office and, or I guess I went through the recruiting round, all went well, told them about my background, college, that kind of thing. And they were like, yeah, I showed your resume to the manager. I want to bring you in. So I show up, and so I had a feeling that this interview was going to be quite different than some of the tech interviews. Keep in mind, right, I've been going through a lot of tech interviews up to this point, and as I gone through my tech interviews, I realizing, like, trust me, on my first tech interview, I went in there with a tucked in shirt, a tie, leather shoes, the full nine. I was like new to the Bay Area, SF, and another funny story is, like, I did interview at Google at one point for a contractor position, and that was the first time, my first exposure to like a real Bay Area engineer, and the guy rolled up on a scooter. And from then on, right, I started dressing up less and less to my interviews. But for this one, because I did my research on the company, I went back in there with a suit, with a dress shirt, tie, tucked in, khakis, right? And I went in there. And the first thing this gentleman says to me is like, hey, I love, you got a great resume. You seem like a great kid, but I'm going to be upfront with you. I think that you're going to totally, absolutely, if I put you in this position, you're going to absolutely bomb and just fail. And that's not what I want to happen, right? And so I want to be able to see if you're up to do this other job. And ultimately, the job that I ended up taking, right, was this job. And he was telling me, and the job was the job that I ended up taking, which, if you've seen in my other videos, is basically a roofing job to do large scale estimations on buildings, to estimate the cost of repairs or rebuilds. And my other role was also just to be able to do samples and, in general, small repairs on the roof as the customer needed, right? How I explained my job was that I never went out to a roof that was perfect. It always had an issue. And so I was always there. I was always the first to be on site to fix the issue, and then potentially, measure out the roof, understand it, and then bring back a larger fix for the roof, for example. Again, I had absolutely no experience, did not know what I was doing. And to be honest, right, I got humbled extremely quickly when I first started that job, just because I knew that it wasn't in my field, but ultimately that's what I went with. It was a great position. I was offered $55K starting, which is amazing starting out. They gave me a truck. All my gas was paid for. I got some cool company shirts, and there I go. I was paired up with an amazing gentleman that showed me the ins and outs of the trade. And the most embarrassing part that I always tell people, right, is like, it might seem easy. You think you know how to use a power tool or a drill, but people don't understand that, especially in trades like roofing, any trade, right? Being an electrician, there's small skills that you can only develop over time. And something as simple as even holding the power tool to do your job takes a level, a skill level, a technique, all that. And so, right, humbled real quick. It's like I went in there, I didn't even know how to hold a power tool. I went through that process, and although it wasn't what I wanted to do in the end, that job was absolutely amazing. I realized that at that point when I entered that job, right, I was no longer in a straight line path to, to work in tech. I took 10 steps back. But the amazing part about that opportunity was that I felt like I took 20 steps forward in many other aspects of my life, right? It was the first time I was challenged to learn a skill, and was lucky enough to get that role. Especially once I entered that job, I realized there was folks that doing that job was not even the the lowest level position, right? The lowest level position of a roofing job is like doing the physical roofing or the tear down of a roof, for example. And so was lucky enough that I was able to get that opportunity. And there it was, right? I felt like I took 10 steps back, but 20 steps forward, being challenged every day, learning this new skill, learning from really amazing people that were many years ahead of me that was willing to take me in, embrace me as one of theirs, and showed me the ways that I needed. In the end, right, like I think back about that opportunity, and I almost feel like that opportunity as a software engineer now, I think back at that opportunity and I realized that it was pretty much exactly what I needed at that time. Just being like a young, dumb kid out in this world, I needed that structure. I needed something to challenge me in that way, and I needed that mentorship. Although my parents were great, they were great mentors, but having someone that you don't know push you and set guidelines for you and set a standard and challenge your standards that you have for yourself, for your life was exactly what I needed. And man, I truly think that hard discipline of that job, it was way better. Maybe I didn't learn coding skills at that time, but it really set me up further than, for example, some of the startup jobs that I potentially could have landed at that time, working at a startup doing entry-level data entry, right? Like this was the discipline level, the restrictions and the standards that they had for me were high. And ultimately that job itself was a big blessing in disguise. Yeah, so I hope that helps a lot. I think moral of the story here is that I was very lucky. I was very lucky to be able to find someone that believed in me. They didn't believe in me for the position I originally applied for, but finding a space, finding a place that someone sees the spark in you and is willing to at least put in some effort into your growth, it's better than going to a place where you're not wanted. And I think that's a great learning lesson that I have moving forward. And one of the really strict things I look for when I look for friends, if I'm ever looking for my next career, and even in the job that I am in today. Another thing is like that I want to talk about is don't be afraid to, I think this is a good lesson of not being afraid to put yourself out there, right? And one of the things about the job market, I read this stat once that like about 80% of the jobs on the job that are created today are not actually posted on the web, right? They're created internally. And so one of the things that kind of that you can easily sell yourself short on is not understanding that. And, if there's a space or a position that you think you can do, if they trust you and like you enough, if they believe in or see the spark in you enough, there is a potential that they can create something new for you or put you in a different role to hopefully get you to that role, right? And so I just wanted to weigh that out a little bit too. And another great learning lesson of just not being afraid to, go after things that you can possibly do. And in the end, my journey from software, from construction, from college was not a straight line. But looking back, I don't think it ever is. I don't think it ever is a straight line for many folks. And if it is, you're one of the few very privileged ones, and all the power to you. But for the folks like myself, that isn't a A, B, C destination where you kind of, you start at point A and maybe you end up in another random point. I think that's okay. And I think it's a part of the growing process. But to end this video off, right, again, my journey wasn't a straight line, but I think that's okay. I think in many ways, right, like it would have been awesome if it was, but I think I learned a lot of great, tough lessons during those moments where I curved off from the regular path. And just understand that that's okay, and understand that in the end, things turned out okay for myself, and I know they will for you as well. And so I hope that story was helpful. I hope you got something out of that. And if you have anything for me, I'd love to hear it. If not, I'll see you on the next one. Latest.